I've never believed in ghosts or supernatural stuff until something happened that still keeps me awake at night. It was 2012. I just moved into a small rental house in rural Ohio for a new job. The place was quiet, surrounded by trees and far from the main road. Peaceful. At least that's what I thought. The first few nights were normal. I'd come home from work, cook dinner, watch TV, and sleep. But on the fourth night, something strange started. At exactly 2:47 a.m., I woke up to a faint knocking sound. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The sound came from my front door. I checked the clock again. 2:47 a.m., too late for anyone to visit. I thought maybe it was a raccoon or wind. I ignored it and went back to bed. Next night, same thing. 2:47 a.m., knock, knock, knock. Always 3 times, always the same rhythm. Now I was creeped out. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the pitch-black yard and the empty porch. This went on for 5 straight nights, every night at the exact same time. I even started setting an alarm for 2:40 to stay awake and catch whoever it was. But whenever I peeked through the window, nothing. Just silence. One night, I finally decided to record it. I placed my phone near the door, recording audio before going to sleep. And as expected, around 2:47 a.m., the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Next morning, I listened to the recording, and my blood ran cold. After the knocks, there was a faint whisper, a man's voice, deep, distorted. He said something like, "Let me in. It's cold outside." I dropped my phone. I called the landlord the next day, demanding to know if anyone had lived there before. He hesitated before saying, "A man used to live there alone, passed away last winter. They found him frozen near the porch." I asked if it happened around February, and he said yes, February 14th, the same date showing on my phone's calendar that week. That night I decided to stay up again, this time with my lights off, camera pointing at the front door. 2:47 a.m., 3 knocks, and through the dim light outside, I saw him, a tall man in an old winter coat, face pale, eyes completely black. He stood still, staring straight at my camera for almost 10 seconds. Then he whispered again, "It's so cold." The screen glitched. The light flickered. When I ran to the door and opened it, no one was there, just my porch covered in frost, and 3 wet footprints leading away into the snow. Barefoot prints. The next morning, I checked the footage, but the file was corrupted. It just showed static, except for one frame. A close-up of a pale man's face, right up against the lens, whispering, "Don't close the door tonight." That was the night I left that house for good. When I moved to Tokyo for work, I found this small, cheap apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect for a single guy like me. Clean, small kitchen, and a view of the street. The landlord seemed unusually eager to rent it out. He barely looked at my papers and said, "If you hear sounds at night, don't worry. These old buildings creak a lot." I thought he was just joking. The first few nights were fine. I'd come home late, make ramen, scroll my phone, and pass out. But soon I started noticing little things that didn't make sense. At first, it was the milk. I'd buy a fresh carton, drink a bit, and leave it in the fridge. The next day, it would be half empty. Then the toilet seat. I always leave it up, but sometimes I'd find it down. I blamed it on my tiredness. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I was just stressed. But one night, something happened that I couldn't explain away. It was around 2:30 a.m. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone. Suddenly, I heard a faint click, the sound of my fridge door opening. I froze. I lived alone. I turned off my phone light, held my breath, and listened. There it was again, a soft rustling sound, plastic bags crinkling. Someone was in my kitchen. I grabbed a broom, the only weapon I had, and slowly crept toward the sound. The kitchen light was off, but the fridge glowed faintly. Its door was slightly open. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for any movement. Then the sound stopped. I quickly turned on the light. No one was there. The fridge door was open and the milk carton was sitting on the counter. I checked the front door. Locked. Windows locked. Impossible. I even laughed a little, telling myself I was overreacting. I went back to bed, heart still racing, but the next morning I found something that made me sick. My toothbrush was wet, and it smelled faintly of something rotten. I called my friend Kenta to come over that evening. He joked that maybe I had a ghost, but when I told him everything, he got serious. He said, "Install a small camera, just to be sure." That night, I placed my phone up on a shelf facing the kitchen. I turned off the lights and went to bed early. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the faint sound of footsteps again. Slow, deliberate, creaking across the floorboards. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The sound stopped. Then I heard the faint sound of chewing, like someone eating, right there in the dark. I didn't dare get up. I waited until sunrise. As soon as light filled the room, I grabbed my phone to check the recording. At first, nothing unusual. Then, around the 2:50 a.m. mark, the screen flickered. From the corner of the frame, something moved, a dark shape sliding down from the ceiling. A woman. She had long, tangled hair, pale skin, and was wearing a dirty white shirt. She dropped quietly from the attic opening, barefoot, and crawled straight to the fridge. She opened it, took the milk, and drank directly from the carton. Then she slowly turned her head and looked straight into the camera. Her mouth twisted into a faint smile, like she knew I was recording. I felt my stomach drop. She didn't leave after that. She wandered around my apartment, touching things, moving them, sniffing my clothes. Then she climbed back into the ceiling, right above my bed, and disappeared. I froze watching that video, feeling like my lungs stopped working. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, they opened the attic door, and the stench hit everyone. Inside was a small nest of blankets, food wrappers, bottles, and clothes. And in the corner, curled up like a spider, was the same woman, barely conscious, filthy, trembling. She had been living there for months. The officers later told me she was a homeless woman who had been hiding in that apartment long before I moved in. She sneaked in through an unlocked window and found her way into the ceiling space. For weeks she would come down at night to eat, drink, and watch me sleep. Sometimes she stood over my bed for hours. When the police took her away, I remember her looking right at me and whispering, "You never looked up." After that, I couldn't stay there another night. Even when I moved out, I kept imagining the sound of quiet footsteps above me, that faint creak in the ceiling. And sometimes, when I can't sleep, I still hear her voice. "You never looked up." When I first moved into that neighborhood, everything felt perfect. Quiet, safe, filled with families and old couples who waved when you passed by. I was 26, working remotely, and just happy to finally afford my own small rental house. Across the street was an older man. He lived alone, always polite, always calm. He'd water his plants every morning, nod when I said hi, and sometimes leave out food for stray cats. Everyone just called him Mr. Evans. He seemed like the kind of harmless old guy you'd see in any small town, but I had no idea what he really was. It started small, missing packages. I'd order things online, and they'd vanish before I could get to them. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of someone walking away from my porch, a tall figure wearing a dark coat carrying one of my boxes. I shouted, but they were gone before I reached the street. The next day, Mr. Evans waved at me like usual, holding his watering can, calm as ever. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, until one night I heard something, faint but clear, a camera shutter. I looked out my window and saw a small red light blinking from across the street. It was pointed directly at my house. The next morning, I walked over and knocked on his door, pretending to be casual. No answer, but I could hear something behind the door. slow breathing. I left, but the feeling stayed, that crawling unease that something was off. A week later, around 3:15 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like a muffled scream. It came from outside. I looked out and saw a dim yellow light flickering from his basement window. And then, something moved. A shadow, pacing back and forth. I grabbed my phone and recorded from my window. The light stayed on for almost 10 minutes before suddenly shutting off. Everything went dark again. The next day, I told one of my neighbors, but she just said, "Mr. Evans, he's harmless, just lonely." But I couldn't shake what I saw. A few days later, while taking out the trash, I noticed an awful smell, like rotten meat mixed with bleach, coming from behind his house. I followed the odor to the fence, but his backyard was locked tight. Still, I could see black trash bags stacked near his basement door. That night, I saw him again, dragging one of those bags inside. Heavy. Whatever was inside wasn't light. That was the first night I thought, he's hiding something. The next week, a young woman from 2 streets over went missing. She was last seen walking home from the bus stop, the same route that passed Mr. Evans' house. Posters went up, cops knocked on doors, but no one had any clues, until I checked my camera footage. I had a small motion-activated camera facing my front porch. Around 11:42 p.m. on the night she disappeared, it picked up something. A car. The same old brown sedan Mr. Evans drove, parking right in front of his house, and a blurry shape of someone walking near it. Then the car door opened, and both figures vanished from view. I went to the police with the footage, but they said it wasn't clear enough. No license plate, no face. Still, they said they'd look into it, but nothing happened, so I decided to find out myself. The night I saw everything. That Friday I waited until 2 a.m. when the neighborhood went quiet. The street was empty. I crossed to his backyard, my phone light dimmed, my heart hammering in my chest. The smell was stronger now, sour and metallic. I crept up to the small basement window and peered through the gap. What I saw still burns in my memory. The basement was filled with clutter, tools, ropes, plastic sheets, and in the middle, there was a wooden chair bolted to the floor. Something was tied to it. At first, I thought it was a mannequin. Then it moved. It was a woman, barely conscious, gagged, her eyes swollen from crying. And right behind her, in that dim yellow light, stood Mr. Evans, expressionless, holding a camera. He adjusted the focus, stepped closer, and whispered something I couldn't hear. I backed away, shaking, almost screaming. My foot hit a loose can. It rolled loudly across the ground. The basement light flicked off instantly. Silence. Then, his basement door creaked open. I ran. Didn't look back. Just ran straight into my house and locked every door. My phone was shaking in my hands as I dialed 911. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, his lights were out. But they broke in, and what they found made national news the next morning. Inside his basement, they found 2 victims, alive but severely traumatized. He had been recording them for weeks. In total, investigators found 7 videotapes, each labeled with dates and initials, some dating back years. Each tape showed different women, all filmed in that same basement chair. The police said he'd been doing it for nearly a decade, moving from town to town, changing his name. In every neighborhood, people described him the same way. Quiet, polite, harmless. I watched them take him away that night, calm as ever, still wearing the same cardigan he used to water his plants in. As they led him into the car, he turned his head and looked straight at me. He smiled and mouthed something. I'll never forget the words. "You watch well." That night I deleted my camera footage, moved out the next day, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see that blinking red light from across the street and wonder how many other cameras are pointed at people right now without them knowing.